So AI is all around us, and that's for good reason, because with AI, you can build some incredible, amazing apps that you couldn't even build even 6 months ago. And so in today's video, I'm going to be showing you an incredible site that gives you access to amazing AI models, and with that, the ability to build incredible apps. And so first, we're going to have a look at the site. We're going to check out some of the models, some of the interesting apps that you can build with the models on there. And then later in the video, I'm going to be building a custom no-code app that allows you to leverage some of the incredible models and apps on the site to build an incredible app yourself for your users. Now, before we get started, as always, all the videos, all the resources I'm going to be showing you in today's video, you will be able to view and or clone from my Patreon. And you're going to see a link to my Patreon community in the description below the video. Now, the website we're going to be talking about today is called Hugging Face, and it's available at huggingface.co. And this is an incredible site where you can get access to some very, very interesting AI models and take a look at how to build an app that leverages one of these AI models as well. So when you first get on the site, you will see that there's lots of things happening, but primarily you want to pay close attention to things like models, data sets, and spaces. Okay, so if you click on models, you will see all the different AI models that are available for you to kind of play around with, right? And in case you don't know what an AI model is, an AI model is essentially a machine learning solution to a particular problem. So maybe this is image recognition, this is text to image, text to video, image to text, visual question answering, document question answering. Any of these types of solutions that have been worked on with machine learning are essentially models that you can take and you can build apps around. You don't really need to train them as much. And the best part is you don't need to spend lots of money and lots of time training these models to give you the answers that you see. And so on this models page, you can take a look at all of these different models. There's models that you may have heard about, and then there's also models that you've never seen before. There's lots and lots of models. The next thing we have is data sets, right? If you go into data sets, you have lots of data that you can play around with, right? Maybe you are building your own model. Maybe you are fine-tuning an existing model. You have lots of interesting data sets. So things like IMDb, this is Internet Movie Database. You have RedCaps, which is Reddit data. You have Wikitext, which is Wikipedia data. You have Open Web Text, lots and lots of data to play with. But in my view, the most exciting thing about this website is the spaces. So if you click on spaces, you're going to see lots of things here. And so what exactly is a space? Well, a space is an app. It's essentially when somebody takes a model and writes a piece of code that interacts with that model to give you the result that you want. And so the next thing you want to do is you want to click here and you want to click on most likes to take a look at the most popular spaces. And we have things like Stable Diffusion. We have DALL-E Mini, which is text-to-image engine here. We have lots of interesting ones, things like GPT, Wolfram Alpha, Whisper, which we're going to take a look in just a second. We have things like Clip Interrogator, which is actually really cool, Hugging GPT, and lots of interesting spaces. Now, this is definitely my favorite part of this website because you can get access to some interesting models that other people may have not even heard about. And, these models aren't really available elsewhere, right? And so, for instance, if you click on this GPT Wolfram Alpha Whisper, you're going to see on a screen that looks something like this. And so the first thing that you want to do is you want to paste your API key, and we're going to go to platform.openai. We're going to generate a new key. I'm just going to call it Hugging Face. We're going to do that. I'm going to copy it. We're going to paste it here, right? Press enter. And now if you scroll down, you can ask it various questions. Okay. You can ask it regular questions, right? But you can also ask it math intensive questions. So for instance, what is 2 to the 30th power, right? You can click on that. It loads the question here, and then you can click on send, and it's going to generate a response for you. And so there's the response. The other thing that you can do is you can enable speech. You can have this person, this AI generated person, give you an answer, right? So if I click on something like how much did it rain in SF today, it's gonna process all of this. And so there you go. This guy is actually speaking to me. I can hear him. I don't know if you can hear them. And essentially he's saying this sentence right here. According to California Nevada River Forecast Center, it rained 0.02 inches in SF today. Okay, so not a lot at all. You can also record from a microphone, right? So if I click this, I will be able to talk to it. And essentially it's going to transcript using Whisper. Okay, so this specific model is doing lots of things, right? It's using GPT as a kind of a chatbot. It's using Wolfram Alpha as kind of the math functionality, the math processes. And then it's using Whisper for transcription. So lots of interesting things. You have tons of settings here, right? Tons of different things that you can configure, tons of settings, and it's actually very cool. I like this this AI kind of person here that's actually moving around and answering. Really, really cool. Really interesting models. Another really interesting model is this clip interrogator, right? And so want to figure out what a good prompt might be to create new images like an existing one. The clip interrogator is here to get you answers, okay? And so this is the reverse, right? So if you think about Stable Diffusion, where it's kind of text to image, this is image to text, okay? And so if you drag an image here, it should hopefully tell you the prompt that you can use to generate a similar image from like, you know, a Stable Diffusion or like a Midjourney system. And so here's some examples here. If we click on this, you're gonna be getting this result here. A watercolor painting of a sea turtle, design digital art featured on etc, etc, etc. Here's another one. If you give it a picture of this cat in this specific style, you're gonna get an output essentially that looks something like this: a painting of a cat in a dark room, granny, weather wax, unsettling image, game icon asset. So lots of interesting things that will hopefully get you to create very similar images in this style for all kinds of objects and subject. Now you can obviously also do it for any images that you want. All you have to do is drag and drop it here. So let's say this red Ferrari, and I hit submit. It's gonna go ahead and try to analyze this image and get me the results. Now, depending on the time that you actually use this model, remember this is public, so anybody can use it. You may have to wait a little, or you may have to wait a lot. So in our case, we have a queue of 61 people ahead of us, okay? So that's quite a lot. So it's gonna take some time to kind of generate this image and get the result. And so I'm gonna leave it running and I'm gonna show you the results when it finishes at the end of the video. Now, if we go back to the list of spaces that we were browsing just a few moments ago, there's one model that really got my attention, and it's this model right here, image to music. So if you open up this model right here, you will see it looks something like this. And what this model does, well, it actually does a couple of things. It sends an image to a clip interrogator, right, which is this model right here. And it generates a text prompt, which is then run through a MooBERT text to music to generate music from the input image, okay? So let's go ahead and drag and drop the same image that we did before, and let's see what kind of music it generates, okay? All right, so there's that red Ferrari again. And you have a couple of options here, right? You can also add your OpenAI API key for some extra functionality. You can also define the intensity, low, medium, high, and you have a mode. And you can set it to track or loop. So I'm just gonna leave it all on default. We're gonna set the track duration to 55 seconds and I'm gonna hit generate from image. And in this case, we were only like third in the line. Okay, so we're actually the second. There are two people before us. So this is gonna be done relatively quicker. When I was testing this model yesterday and a couple of days ago, I had, you know, like 50 people in front of me. So it would take a long time to finish everything. And so we're gonna wait a few minutes for this to finish and then see the music, the audio that it's gonna generate for us. All right, so it's processing now. All right, so it is finished. And the first thing it gave us was the clip interrogator caption. And this is a description of this image here, okay? And we did not specify the OpenAI key, but it did give us the audio file link. So now we can even play it here. So I'm gonna play it right here, and I'm also gonna play it in the video as well. Okay, very interesting. I don't know, you'll be the judge if that kind of fits in with the image. But pretty cool track. Pretty cool track. Pretty interesting track. Interesting choice of music. And so as you can see, this model was able to perform for us and give us the results that we were seeking, chiefly generating music from an image. Now, what's interesting about the site is that, yes, you can do it using a web UI, right? So you can, send an image and get music, or you can, give a text and get an image, or the reverse, etc., etc. But the other thing that you can do with a lot of these spaces here, if you scroll down, you're going to see use via an API. So if you click here, you're going to see some instructions of how you can use this space, all right, essentially a little app using an API. And so what this means is that you can externally connect to the space, connect to this app, have it do the work for you, and then give you the results. And you can obviously use these results in your app. Okay, so something like Flutterflow or pretty much any other no-code app builder. It makes it a lot more powerful. Now, before you're able to kind of send data and build apps around this API, which is what we're going to be doing in just a moment, you have to really understand what kind of data it expects. And specifically for the image, you're not going to be sending like a URL of the image, right? You're going to be sending the image itself. Specifically, you're going to be encoding that image as a base64 string, right? So if you don't know what that means, don't worry about that, right? It's essentially the bytes of the image itself, okay? It's actually the whole image. We're just sending the image encoded in a specific way. So you can Google for something called a base64 to image, okay? And this allows you to encode an image to the specific format and then encode it back, right? So this is base64 to image, but you also have image to base64. So now I can take any image, upload it here, and it's going to give me the string here. And so here's an image of a Ferrari, and this is the result that we're getting. And so you can use tools such as this one to generate the specific string and then send it to the API. Now, you can test an API using this web UI here. You can definitely do it, but I personally like to test my APIs using a dedicated app. And so here's an app that I use, and I essentially crafted the request. So here's my request. This is everything from the actual space, right? It gives us a URL, and it gives us the kind of data that we have to send. So first we need to send the image, and this is the encoded image. And then there's a couple of other parameters, right? So like the track duration, intensity, mode, etc., etc. So I set track duration to 30, low track, and then I'm not using an OpenAI API key. And when you execute this, you're going to get a response that looks something like this, right? You're going to get the description of the image, and you're going to get the actual WAV file, which is that audio that's being generated. So it's very important to know what the response looks like, because that way you can build an app that's going to be able to parse the response and get the exact data that you want. So in this case, this is the description here, and this is the WAV file. This is the audio here, and it actually gives us instructions, right? So it tells us, represents the object that includes path to audio file, and you also have to prepend this, right? Because this is this response here, the name, but we also need to prepend this URL, because obviously this is not a URL that we can play direct. And so once I knew what the response is going to look like, what the response is going to be, and plus I know what the request looks like, I know the structure of the request, I knew at this point that I will be able to build out an app that does exactly that. And that's exactly what I did. So if you come in here, I build out an app that takes an image from a URL. So you can just input a URL. It shows you the image, and then it generates the music, and then you can play the music once it was generated. So before I show you how I built it, let me show you how the app works. And then we're gonna come back and I'm gonna show you how I build this app. All right, so here's the app. And the first thing that you wanna do is you wanna paste an image URL. Okay, so I have this image right here. I have it online. I can paste the URL and I'm gonna press enter. We have the car displayed here. Now we can click on make music. It's gonna process everything. And now we should be able to play the music as well. And so if you click on this button here, you're going to be redirected to the music URL. Now, unfortunately, while I was building this app, I stumbled on a particular problem that was out of my control. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what the problem is, and I'm going to tell you how I solved this problem. And that's going to help you to be more resilient as you're building your own apps. So remember when I mentioned when you're building apps on this platform, sometimes it's very, very quick, right? You send a request and you get a response in like seconds, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 20 seconds. Other times, there's a line, so you may be like 5th in line, 10th in line, etc., etc. Now, the main issue I faced was whenever I was using this model, using an API, it would always take a long time. Sometimes I would get through and I would get my results in a timely fashion. But most of the time, it would just take a long time. And the main issue with the API, and this is going to be an issue in many situations, is that if the API is taking a long time to process it, right? Sometimes it's a minute, maybe it's 30 seconds, maybe it's a couple of minutes. The API is just going to time out. So in our case, this response took just under a minute. So I got lucky. It took 56 seconds. But lately, as you can see, I'm getting this 504 gateway timeout, which means that the model is just taking too long. And the server is just, it's timing out. It's just abandoning the request because it doesn't want to waste the resources. And so as you can see, the timeout is around 60 seconds. So if the model in that particular space takes longer than a minute to kind of perform and do everything, your API is going to time out on that public model. Of course, when you're building an app, you're going to have your own model. You're going to have your own private model that only you are using, and it's going to be very, very fast. But when you're building an app, right, when you're building an MVP, you need something that works, right? You need something that shows how things are going to work. And that is why what I did was I took my response. I took the response where I got essentially lucky. It was very, very quick. And I created a dummy API. I created a dummy API that essentially mimics a real API. And I used a tool called make.com. Here I created a quick scenario where I'm sending a request to here and I'm getting back a dummy response. And this is nice because that way I can get all the data that I need and I can display it to the user. And then when the time comes, I can switch over to my own private personal API using my own API keys, where it's going to be very, very fast. And so what I did in my own app is that I created two API settings. I created one that points to the real one, this one here. And I also created one that points to my own dummy API. And all it's doing is it's giving us this response. And so if I click on test API call, I'm always going to get the same response here. And that way I can build my app that will parse everything and make sure that everything works because I know the response is always going to have the same format. So when that real API starts to work, whether it's going to be that public API or my own API, rest assured that my app is still going to function and do exactly what it needs to do. So now that you understand kind of the issue that I faced, let me show you how I build this app so that you can kind of build a similar app if you're looking to use this particular model. So the first thing that I set up is the state, the app state, right? We have two variables, the image URL for displaying the image and the audio, the output audio URL, which is going to have that final audio after everything is done processing, right? So this is an image path and this is just a string here. And now the next thing I set up were the APIs, right? So I have this first API and this is this real API that's pointing to this one, right? So if you scroll down, you can use it via an API and this is the API. You have data, you have the response object. And the way I have it set up here, well, I don't have any headers here. I have a body that mimics the body of the request, right? So if you go over here, you will see that this is the JSON request and then you have data and then you have an array of different objects there. So if you go back to my app, I have data and then I have an array of different objects. And these are variables, right? These are all string variables in this case, right? Image, duration, intensity, mode, API key. And right away, if we're thinking about the types of variables we're going to be sending, well, the image is going to be that base encoded image, right? We're going to take that image URL and we're going to base encode it, right? We have the duration, which is an integer, intensity is string, mode is string, and then open API key, which is a string. And this is obviously an optional variable, okay? And so if we come over here, we have some sample variables and we can test an API call. Now, the most important thing here when it comes to an API is that you want to get your variables set up, right? So remember, if we come over here and we do a response, and this is using my fake API that always works and it's very, very quickly, we can take a look at the variables that we need, right? So if you come over here and you click on recommended, you can take a look. Okay, so, I want data. Data is everything, just in case. I also want the value, in case I want to display the value, right? This is this description of the car, right? Now, one important thing that you need to do is you need to set up a custom JSON path for this audio URL, right? So if you come over here, you see we have this audio URL right here, right? This is this URL right here, and I have a custom JSON path. So this is the second element of these, and it's data1.name. This is audio URL, and this is the audio URL that you're getting. You need to store this, right? This is very, very important because Flutterflow does not pick it up automatically. It picks up some things, but it doesn't pick up these custom ones, right? So you need to configure this. Once you've configured your API call and you've configured these JSON paths, you can start using them inside of your app. And that's kind of the point, right? You want to be using them inside of your app. And so now that we've configured the API calls, we've also configured the app state. Let me show you the app real quick. It's just one page. We have this image URL, which is essentially the URL where we enter the image. And I have a flow here, right? I have a simple flow that unsubmit, right? So you can press enter. Once you press enter, there's no submit button. We save the image URL. We save it as part of the app state, right? So we have an image URL, we just save it there. And then we display it here, right? So if you come over here, this is just displayed. So the moment you enter it here, it's displayed here. Now, this is where a lot of the magic happens, right? We have this make music, right? And if you come over here, we have three actions, right? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to convert the image, the URL of the image, right? We need to download the image and convert it into that format, okay? So there are ways of doing it with Flutter and Flutterflow. And here's my custom action. And so what I'm doing here is I'm fetching the URL, right? This is my request, and I'm checking, okay, were we able to fetch it correctly, right? 200 means that we were able to fetch it correctly. So if the status is not 200, I just return an error. But typically, if you enter an image that you see, an image that you know exists, you're not going to be getting an error. So if the server returns a 200 OK response, convert the image to base 64. And here I'm using a function that essentially converts it to base 64. This is a built-in function, so we don't have to do much. And here I'm essentially getting this converted image, right? And returning it as that long string that looks something like this, right? This is kind of what it looks like. This is kind of what it expects. And really, if you're going to be doing a lot of kind of images using APIs, sending images, most of the time they're going to expect this kind of format because this is exactly what the image is. This is the real image here. And so that's what the function is doing. This function is essentially taking that URL, fetching the image and converting it into this format. And once we have this format, we can execute our API call. Okay, so in this case, I'm using this dummy API call, but in the real world, you're going to be using this real API call. You're going to set your variables, right? We have all of these variables, and essentially you can set them right here. Let's say variable name image, and then you can add another variable name duration, etc., etc. We have the image, so all you have to do is grab the response here. So action outputs, you're going to go in here, image a string. This is what this responds it with. You're going to set it here. You're going to set the duration. You're going to set all that. And then this backend call, remember, we have those JSON paths. So all we need to do is capture that URL of the WAV file. Okay, so this is kind of what this is doing. This is capturing this audio URL using that custom audio URL JSON path that we're getting. And it captures it, sets it as an output audio URL app state variable here. And now we have this button that has a very, very simple flow. We open it up and this just launches a URL. Okay, and so I have another custom function that prepends that URL, that the host name, right? So remember, if you go back here, we need to prepend, right? So we're getting this, but we need to prepend this. We need to prepend this to it. So I have another custom function that does that. And so this right here, it's using this get audio URL custom function here in order to give us that full URL, right? That pre-appended URL. And in fact, this thing right here, this make music, this is not a custom function. This is a custom action here, right? Because we actually need to use it inside of this action flow. Custom functions, you cannot use these inside of these action flows. And that's pretty much the app, right? We pull the image, we convert it into that special base64 format. We send all that data to the API. We get back the URL of the audio file, that WAV file, and then we can simply use it as an input to button so that when you click on it, it redirects to that audio URL and plays that audio file. And the result is that you have a very, very simple prototype or maybe an MVP that allows you to create audio from an image. So maybe you're looking to build an app like this, or maybe you are looking to build this functionality into a more comprehensive, more complete app. It's really up to you how far you want to take it. But regardless, if you are looking to kind of implement some of this functionality into your apps, or maybe you want to use this app just how you see it, you definitely need to check out my Patreon community. Because when you join our amazing Patreon community, not only will you get access to all the Flutterflow apps that I built thus far, and this means you can easily view and or clone them right inside the Flutterflow, and that means you don't need to build them from scratch, but you also get access to extra content such as Q&As, live streams, behind the scenes content, as well as our Patreon exclusive masterclass series. And this is where a community votes on a specific topic, and I do an in-depth video where I talk about some important things that you have to understand in order to master this specific topic area. And judging by the many comments in our community, a lot of people really like that series. And in fact, I am set to do another masterclass probably later this week. And so if you do not want to miss it and you want to check out some of the apps that I built on this channel, maybe clone some of them as well, you definitely owe it to yourself to check out our amazing community and consider becoming a member. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video where we are building a very interesting app with some emerging AI technologies, you should definitely check out this next video that you're going to be seeing in the corner of your screen. That is another video where I'm using some interesting AI technologies to build a cool app as well.